All right, it seems we are live. If you can hear and see us, give us a thumbs up. Um, we are ready to kick off our part one of our MST Survivor to Victim um, special. So, hoping that everyone can see us, we're just going to wait for some folks to log on, and then we will kick off. Very good.
Just a little bit. There you go. All right.
Alrighty, we're just waiting for. Okay, now we're good. Um, on the main Facebook page. So we're just waiting for some folks to start chiming in as they come in. So if you can see us, definitely feel free to comment below. Let us know your branch of service. Let us know if you can hear and see us, and we'll kind of begin here in a second.
Oh, hi, Army Nat and Kim.
Kim. Hey guys.
Welcome.
Hey KB. What time is it there in the Philippines? KB's up supporting us.
Hey, Matt.
Maria. Hey Maria. Pam. Pam says she can hear us all just fine.
Oh, good. Thanks, Pam.
Hey Catherine. It is 1 a.m. in the Philippines.
Whew. Thanks for joining us.
Exactly. Thank you guys.
It's either a late night or an early morning.
I feel like they work 24/7, honestly.
Mm.
They're always available.
Huh.
Austin Williams.
There's Austin. Lawrence. Oh, hey, Keith. Julie from Iowa. Uh-oh, the Hawkeyes.
Congratulations. She just won her MST claim after 40 years. Don't give up.
Yes.
That's awesome. Hi, Justina.
Hi, Justina.
Hey, Aaron.
Oh, Aaron from Texas.
You can hear and see us. Awesome. Hey, Catherine. Howdy
Hey,
from
Catherine.
Pennsylvania. Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Georgia.
Bradley
Awesome.
Burton. Oh my gosh. Hi. I haven't heard from you in so long. He was one of my first clients.
And Melissa.
So for those that are new here, we just like to kick off the show, kind of let people start logging in, and then we'll make a point to kind of just recognize folks as they join us and jump on. So if you know someone, definitely feel free to share the post, tag them. Today we're going to have part one of a two-part series where we're tackling the subject of military sexual trauma. survivors. And we are discussing the first part, which is going from victims to survivor. We have Jen, trauma specialist, who was with us before, and veteran coach Amy on Team Champion, who is a military sexual trauma survivor herself. And today, what we really want to talk about is the journey from being a victim to being a survivor. There are resources and information that we want to share with everyone out there. We know that this is not a very popular topic to speak about, but this is how we tear down stigma. This is how we begin to empower people to move forward. And by bringing Jen into the conversation and Amy, it's really about having that talk of just understanding, right, your story and what's happening there. And then tomorrow, in part two, what we'll discuss is the claim aspect as to how to actually put together that claim, given your situation, given what may have happened, and the details surrounding what you may or may not have to be successful to win your claim. So this is a conversation of going from being a victim to being a survivor, and then tomorrow we go from being a survivor to being rated for that disability, and how that was successfully done, right? So given the nature of what the topic is, we were able to secure 2 days to do this. So we wanted to honor our audience and those that may see this, after the live, to have a more in-depth conversation. So as we begin, I want Jen, I'll let you, our guest, introduce yourself a little bit about kind of your background for those that may have not seen our previous work, and your
Right.
specialties and so forth, and then we'll introduce Amy and kind of begin from there.
Thanks, DP. I'm honored to be here for this conversation. I know, as DP said, MST is a tough topic, and I'm happy to be able to help address the stigma. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I was living in Colorado. I'm back in Minnesota now. And I've been in the field for about 20 years, have worked with the military, including at Fort Carson for a short stint. Um, I also, my grandpa was in World War II in the Navy. My dad was packing parachutes during Vietnam in the Air Force Reserve. And my most recent significant other, we were together 10 years, has been in the Air Force for 24 years as a chief master sergeant. He's a C-130 loadmaster. So it's neat to be able to show up and serve veterans. It is definitely something I've been around in my life. I'm trying to think of what else I usually share. My clinical expertise, I focus on complex trauma, complex PTSD, and what that means is people who've had a lot of trauma over a long period of time, often starting in their youth, but not necessarily. And so this is something I really specialize in, and I don't want to say get excited about because no one's excited that anyone was harmed, but I'm really honored to be able to hold space for people in their healing.
Thank you for that. And I'll let Amy introduce herself. Tell us a little about yourself. All right, what's this VC thing I see under your face here?
So my name is Amy Lacy. I'm former Air Force. I was in for 11 years. I was in dental. And I came on board VACI back in August. A friend of mine who's a former VMC and now a coach brought me on. And then I was fortunate enough to be on DP's team. And through this process, I initially inquired to get my increase. And I just recently went from 70% to 100% PNT for PTSD MST. The road definitely wasn't easy, but it's worth it. Hang in there. I love what I do. I love helping the vets. I love learning. I love doing these lives. It's always fun doing them with DP and Jen. I learn so much. And I'm just happy to be here and hope that I can reach some people. I do want to give a shout out to one of my clients who, Carrie, she's at work and she's hiding in the closet, and we had a conversation today, and she's ready to give up. So I'm so glad that she joined and that she's watching, and I hope that she will find the courage through today and tomorrow to not give up and keep fighting her fight. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here and hope that we can reach some people and be encouraging for those that are fighting their fight.
Awesome. So, with that said, full disclaimer: we are veterans helping veterans as far as me and Amy are concerned. Jen has graced us with basically having a conversation to bring awareness to the topic, but we would be, remiss to not point out that this is information. This doesn't constitute medical
Uh-huh.
advice. This does not replace the fact of getting therapy, speaking to someone. But we hope that you walk away today at least with something to begin the conversation, right? For many of us, I can share that when I first understood the field of psychology and psychiatry, I couldn't tell the difference between one or the other. I just knew I had to speak to someone as a veteran dealing with PTSD, and at least knowing where to start the conversation. I think it's key here, right? So for those that may be listening, again, we hope that this really just empowers you wherever you are at, whether you're listening to us or watching us live today, or you catch us on a repeat later on down the road. This is about saving lives. We've done a great job of speaking and trying to break down the stigma of PTSD. However, there is a staggering number of military sexual trauma, event statistics and so forth that are not being tracked and we don't know. We're going to have another of our coach, VC Kenneth, as well, who is a male MST survivor himself. He's also on our team. Sadly, though, he had an emergency that literally happened right before we went live, so he had to kind of step out for a second and attend to some family matters. But know that basically the things we want to discuss today, we want to respect both the female veteran and the male veteran because both populations are heavily impacted. I also want to share that we will be putting resources in the comments section. One of the things that you all will see here, it will be some of the infographics that we're sharing, and this will have information for you to be able to download, share with others, and empower yourself to some statistic information, where to get help, and so forth. So this information will be linked as well for all of you to review and see. So with that being said and done, again, and it's also going to be a blog post, so that'll be in the description after we're done. That will follow this. Thank you, Jen, for putting that together and
Yeah.
sharing some information for our veterans there. So with that said and done, and to begin the conversation, um, Jen, on your side, sexual trauma, military sexual trauma. Again, we're not going to exploit details of an event. However, we want to be able to talk about the journey from being in a place, right? Just, so we're not triggering anyone or having to really go to that place. But can you give us a little breakdown just for those that may think, well, that doesn't apply to me because in my mind, this is the only thing that applies to that, right? At times, there's a
Mhm.
misconception of what that even entails, right? When it comes to assault, harassment, things of that such. From the clinical
Mhm.
perspective, MST, what is that, in layman's term?
Yeah, so thanks, DP. So what we really look for is unwanted um, treatment of you that is sexual in nature. And actually, one of the things that you pointed out, I'm glad that you mentioned, Kenneth. A lot of times, I just want to say, male veterans see some of this behavior as part of hazing or just kind of part of the process or bullying that happens when you're in the military. And so that would include anything that looks like hazing but is sexual in nature. So, I'm not in the military and I probably don't need to even list what some of that is, but y'all probably have an idea of what I'm getting at there. Things that involve genitals, things that involve your bottom, things that involve your chest, if you're a woman in particular, those kind of things. I think something that's really important to point out is that military sexual trauma can happen on or off duty. It can happen on or off base. It can be something that is done to you by another military member, or it could be a civilian working for the military. So I think it's important to remember that. And another really important piece is you may have appreciated the attention at first. Like, let's say you're at a gathering, and maybe, someone in your unit is paying attention to you and you like the flirting or whatever's happening. But when that crosses the line into behavior that you don't want, exploitive behavior, things like that, that's when it can be classified as military sexual trauma, especially if you're saying no or to want to say no but feel like you can't because of the power dynamic. That's when it becomes military sexual trauma. One last thing I'd like to say is that military sexual trauma can also include sexual harassment. So that can include lewd jokes. It can include, swatting people's bottom. One of the things I heard a lot from the service members when I was working at Fort Carson is if someone fell back on a run, they would ask them if their female parts were hurting to males. Um, that would definitely be sexual harassment, both to any females in who are there, but also to the males that they're saying it to. So there's really quite a wide range of things that could be considered here. And the ultimate thing is was it wanted? Was it unwanted? Lastly, I want to make sure that people know, if you have had alcohol or you're not able to consent because the person is superior to you, that would be another example of unwanted, because you're not able to stand up to that person because they're in a position of power, or you might be intoxicated.
So,
Yeah.
and so that touches on a lot of points. So there's a very interesting thing that I just kind of wanted to at least flesh out, which is authority, right? The dynamics of authority, the dynamics of being in an environment, right, where you hold the line, right? You have my back, I have your back. There's a certain, brotherhood, sisterhood, right? And sadly, when events like this happen, right, that infringes on the fabric of what we do. And outside of this space, there are instances of crimes, atrocities, things that we've seen that who happen in military environments, right? The reality is that the military is nothing but a subculture of the world at large. Right? There are bad people, there are bad actors, there are all the things we see in the world. But what makes it very interesting and different from the perspective of the military side is, and Kenneth would have shared some of this, is when a superior, right, is the aggressor, is the attacker, right? How do you operate in that space? And there's some key points that we may not get to today, but tomorrow will be part of markers, right? And that's a topic that I want to kind of just put out there right now, right? Looking at the word markers. Sadly, because of the topic, there are many instances where we don't have reports of events, right? Things go unreported, unsaid, so the statistics and all that isn't accurate. However, markers tell a story of what's happening, right? It's like almost, and again, Jen, you can, kind of elaborate a little bit on this, but to kind of explain for everyone, because I think it's good to be able to start, not normalizing what's happened or may have happened, understanding how to understand what's happened, is like a child that may have been exposed to certain things. They may not be able to articulate the events or traumas that have happened, but there are markers happening where something is happening with Jane or Billy, right? All of a sudden now her tummy hurts all the time when so and so comes around. All of a sudden now you don't feel well when this happened, or you oops fell again, and every time this happens there's a pattern of things that are happening, and we see that in kids and we can identify that. In the adult side of the house, in the military especially, markers, take the form of Amy was, let's say, on the path of promotion, and she was a high riser, and all her reports were great, and she was a performing superstar airman. And then something happened in December of 2011, and reviews became negative. She started to show up late. All the things that made up who airman, Lacy was, now begin to kind of erode, right? And now sick call trips come, doctor visits for things randomly, finding ways to get out of the unit. Like all these things are happening subconscious, because regardless of age, would it be safe to say, Jen, that there is a fight or flight defense mechanism that looks up to get away from this, right? So from a child,
Yep.
I don't have the words, but I'm basically trying to avoid something, right? And in
Mm-hmm.
adults, that also does take place. So I'd like Amy, when as we flip over to her, to kind of talk a little about that, and we'll come back to you, Jen. But I think that the marker piece is very crucial, because many folks will say, "I never reported," Jen. Amy, I never talked about this. I have no records. I have nothing. They're not going to believe me. But markers is key, right? Because we have to be able to, I think at first, is identify that something happened, period. Beyond everything else, right? Forget the rating, forget everything else, justice, recompense, making right. No. All of that means nothing to the sanity of who is Amy Lacy and how do we in turn begin to get you the help. Everything else we can talk about later. right? Because sometimes it's like they won't believe me for my claim. I'm like, we need to get you in therapy first. Are you able to
Right.
understand what's happened to you? Own your story, understand what it is. Don't dwell in that and drown in it. But that's the first step. So, Amy, on your side, MST, well, what is that?
Gosh, you guys have hit on so many points that I can relate to and that I deal with regularly. To Jen's point, right now, if I'm being totally honest, I have a majority of men that I'm dealing with MST, which was a little surprising for me, right? Um, it's difficult, and some of them, it's a very difficult, sad situation. One that I'm dealing with that's just a really tough situation. It was a hazing that ended up turning into like a sexual assault by multiple men, and
So,
basically
so,
they
so,
were threatened.
so I think there's a powerful thing there. As a coach and as an MSC survivor, you have seen a majority of men who have been dealing with this.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Right now,
Before we get to them, give me Amy's 30-second elevator speech of what is MST to you. We saw what Jen said. I want to like break it down to me, Amy. I think I may have it. You're like me, right? The doctor's a doctor. I don't want to talk to her right now. You just give it to me straight. What's
Yeah,
your story?
so military sexual trauma to me is basically what Jen said, an unwanted, uninvited, violation of your privacy, of your personal body, of what you want or you don't want. And it very well could be, I think there's a lot of guilt and shame and that comes along with it, where mine, like Jen was saying, mine wasn't military related. Mine was off duty. Mine was actually a friend. I would say a friend, but somebody that I knew. I had a really bad migraine, and he offered to give me a ride home because everybody else was still hanging out. And so mine wasn't a military situation, but I reached out to. I was kind of new to the unit, and I reached out to a nurse that I really didn't know that came and got me where I was left and took me to the emergency room. And that was my documentation. So I had that documentation when it came to, being rated. A lot of people don't have that, but it doesn't mean that you still can't get rated. I've had some people say like, hey, I invited them to my room to watch a movie, and then one thing led to another, but I didn't want that. Was it my fault? Should I not have done that? No, it's not your fault, right? You didn't want it. He didn't stop. It's unwanted. That's military sexual trauma, right? Or just, it doesn't necessarily have to be military, but sexual trauma in general.
But I think that's a good point to kind of flesh out real quick. From Jen's side, from your side, there's various ways this can come down, right? Some people think the very extreme of sexual trauma and don't look at those subtle things, right? Because there's different stories and ways. And again, I've worked with countless veterans who are male survivors and female survivors, and having coaches that are able to relate and have that conversation, I think, adds another level of support. The best way that I can put what, for example, Amy and Kenneth are able to provide, and many others here at VA Claims Deciders, we have a lot of survivors, MSC survivors who are rated in many of our teams. I would offer to you that there's a power in being able to reach down into that darkness that you may be in when someone says I got out of there, and you can too, right? I can't prepare what happened yesterday, but I'm telling you, I crawled and got myself out of there. And the reality is, it wasn't with this. I had to reach up, and someone pulled me up and helped me a little bit. And as coaches, that's really, I think, a message we have to push, right? Amy's not going to be my therapist, right? But she can reach a hand to help me get up and say, look, you go that way, right? I think there's a power in the fact of saying, Amy, you go that way. That's where the help is at. And being able to say someone like Jen can help and be of a resource to you. But to kind of really just highlight those points. One, men and women, we see that men much more because just the demographics of the majority of men in the military. Amy, you said a story that I think was very interesting because Kenneth is not here, that I just wanted to highlight without getting into too much detail about one of our past clients, right, that experienced military sexual trauma. as a man. And from that point forward, one of the things that they began to do was to ensure that physically, right, they
Yeah.
became, you know,
All right.
untouchable, indestructible, fearsome. You know, I go from this 150 pound scrawny guy to a 250 pound, you know, machine muscle thing that basically, you know, will push you away. And I will, you know, and we can talk a little bit about it, but I think that the key there is that's the story of a man. A woman will have other defense mechanisms. For all the push ups and the size you can put on, inside, you are the person that is hurting. You are still that person that is jaded. And no matter what all of this looks like outside, no matter how much you grow and what defenses you put in, and if you walk around with a baton, it doesn't matter. Inside, that work hasn't done. It's good that you may have put the work in the gym to say this will never happen again because I will fight it off. Here, what did you do? Here, what did you do? For you, Amy, a question I have, you know, kind of, you know, sharing that point that kind of, you know, what I probably touched on is how did you get to the point? And again, your journey was different where you had, you know, documentation. In Kenneth's case, there was nothing, and both veterans are rated today.
Right.
But to get to the point beyond having things reported, to get the help, to be able to just say help, even if you couldn't say it, but to go into therapy. How was that first process for you? Right, because Jen could say all day to you, she's blue in the face, come here, get some help, we have tools. And for you, it's like, I hear you, Ghost Rider, but in one ear, out the next, the way my tinnitus is set up, I don't hear you, right? Um, tell me about that initial step, Amy, for you as just a veteran.
I think, initially when it happened, the nurse that took me, Colonel LaChapelle, who's amazing, she has probably saved my life in a lot of ways. She kind of forced me to. She didn't really give me. I worked in the med group. She was a nurse in the med group. She talked to the mental health. One thing that was a huge deterrent for me is that she kind of the appointments and told me, hey, just go a couple times at least, talk to somebody. I also have a great friend that walked into me when I had a breakdown, John, who is also a lifesaver for me, that really helped me and encouraged me along the way. That he was a friend that kind of provided that therapy for me, not necessarily professional, but he could tell when things were getting to me. So I kind of reached out and leaned on him, right? But one thing I will say is that there were a lot of pushback. There was a breach of my HIPAA. An airman thought it was funny to tell other people in the med group what happened, and I shut down. And I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to continue forward. And it really pushed me away significantly. And it wasn't until after I got out of the military, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, that when you're in the military and you're doing your job, you stay busy, right? You have kids, you have family, you have work. And then when you're out of the military and you're kind of, I wasn't really twirling my thumbs because I had 3 kids by myself. But my ex was deployed for a year, but it really gave me this time to really think like, wow, I'm not okay. I think I need to come out, and I think I need to talk about this. So once I moved to Colorado, I established a relationship with my provider, and I've been seeing her since April of 2013. I see her every week. I have absolutely no shame in it. And when I have those tough moments, I talk to her. One thing that is really important to me is it does affect my parenting in some ways. I have some significant triggers that affect me parenting, one being butterflies, one being northern lights, and one being the color red. So when it comes to parenting, I need help. I still need that
Say that
help.
one more time, because that's a powerful thing you just shared. What did you say about colors?
So red is a trigger for me.
Mm.
So, it's I don't mind sharing it. I share it with a lot of clients. That was the color of my boy shorts that I had on when the incident happened, that I watched them take and put in a plastic bag. And
I think, and again, Amy, and for those watching us, Amy works on my team, so part of my job is to make sure that we don't get too into detail about things for obvious reasons.
yeah,
But I think there's a power there, right? To
yeah,
kind of segue to Jen here for a second, because you shared something. There is someone out there that doesn't have anything to come to after service, right? They're single, there's no kids, And building a relationship is something that, arguably is tarnished, right? You're not trusting.
Right.
And that's something that will now be a process to work through. So
Mm-hmm.
in your instance, having children leaving service and dealing with that, having a trigger like that, how many red shirts does your kids have, right? Like think about just the everyday life of someone who now is living with something traumatic like this, right? Because we don't look at life out of the military, of those things that may happen, or hey, mommy, I want this thing, and you're trying to be a mom but not revert into a defense mechanism. That we look at it from someone cuts me off, and here comes PTSD, right? And I'm just gonna go into defense mode and combat operator. No, this is a parent who now is triggered by something. A 2-year-old comes up and says, "Mommy, mommy, buy me this." Right? Like, you know
Absolutely,
what I mean? Like
absolutely.
that's
I have girls that love butterflies, right? And my son, his first job was at a movie theater, and his uniform was red Coca-Cola, and he wore it all the time. And there have been times that if I'm doing laundry and I'm not having a good day and I come across red, it goes in the garbage. I walk it out to the garbage. And so I say that to say that going from a victim to survivor, which I absolutely love. Sometimes we still revert back to that frustration and that anger and that, am I ever going to get over this? It's a process.
but you dropped the key point there, though. This is not I reported a thing or I got help for a thing and I'm fine, right? I think, and Jen, if you could chime into this piece, right, from that journey of taking that first step, right? What does that look like when I walk in and I'm like, you know what, Jen, I've never been here. I don't even know if this is for me. I'm probably wasting my time. Somebody had it worse, right? Because that's a military thing. Someone has it worse. Someone has
Absolutely.
had it worse. This could have been an extreme case. Someone died of an extreme case. And because I'm here, someone had it worse. We always revert to that world and that piece. But to the effect of that continuous journey that Amy just shared, that is needed in this. And I think that's something that people don't understand. This is not a dental appointment, come twice a year, check up, you're good to go, off you go. This is something that you have to understand. It's going to be continual, right? There are certain things in life that once you decide to make that journey, it's in your benefit to understand this is a part of you. If you are a man, for example, that is, told by his doctor, you have got to take, hormone therapy, right? Testosterone replacement. This is something you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. This is not just I took a pill one day and it fixed the thing, right? And from the internal side, right, we can identify with that, right? If I'm put on, diabetes and medication, then that's just what I do now, right? It's my medication for life. But when it comes to the internal, we don't look at those things, right? Like, do I seem to see you, recurrently, Jen? How does this work? Can you talk about that initial step in and the hesitation, I guess, in your experience that you have seen that you can at least say to someone, I know that this is what I see coming in, and it actually as is this, right? Because my conception is you're going to sit there and tell me everything that happened in detail, and it's just like I don't want to go and do that, right? Like, I've never talked to a therapist, Jen. How does this work? Break it down for me.
Well, so I want to actually talk about a couple points. One of the things that Amy said is, sometimes the coaches are a doorway, right? Like us therapy people, we can be kind of scary, because we use weird language sometimes, and I don't know, we look serious, which is only because we carry a lot of shit. But anyway, you know, and so it can be scary to come see one of us, especially because there's so much stigma around what that means. And so I think whatever doorway you have, whether it's, a coach like Amy or a nurse, maybe you do go to mental health on base or post, maybe you do go to the VA, maybe it's a military family life counselor, an MFLAC. Or maybe it's Military One Source. I know that's another option. But once you get to a therapist and you're going to do trauma treatment, that first appointment is always an I don't want to say an assessment, but it's gathering history. But here's what I'll say. We're interested in your history, but we don't need to know the gory details.
Right.
And here's why. If you've ever read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, that he explains it quite well. It is not useful to you necessarily. I mean, automatically useful. Some people might find it useful to repeat over and over again what happened to you.
Oh,
You should got it.
how handy, Amy.
That's
Yes.
super handy. Thank you. Thank you for having my visual aid. Oh, wrong way. I think I have to go this way.
Great.
Okay. um, but yeah, it, trauma's in the body, right? And so telling the story of it isn't really what heals it, right? Bessel van der Kolk, actually, I went to a conference with him, a 2-day conference back in 2009, and he said therapists need to get over their voyeuristic need to know what happened.
Mhm.
Like, seriously.
But Jen, there's a key there. Again, I've never talked to a therapist, but I think it's poignant there what you just said.
Uh-huh.
And sadly, though, there may be a therapist that you may not jive with.
Oh my
You are
gosh, so true.
not. I repeat, again, I'm not. I am just a veteran who maybe has seen a therapist once or twice. You are not relegated to work with someone that you cannot build a healthy relationship to take this journey that requires continuous work. And to
Yep.
Jen's point, what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is some people may want to go down that rabbit hole of details. It is not necessary, right? And again, I don't want to in any shape, fashion, or form diminish the expertise in the room here, but it's like if I fell out of a vehicle and broke my leg, I have a broken leg. The details of how the heck I fell out the car is not the problem here. Can we address the fact that my leg is broken, I'm bleeding? Let's patch that. We can work
Right.
on other areas of how to not fall again later. And again, this is a very, very, you know, basic example, but I think it's useful to understand that the focus is really to begin to give it the patient the tools to move forward. There are therapies and modalities that we can touch on in a minute as to what's available that can uncover some of that, but it's a journey of when you are ready. Is that safe to say?
That is 100% safe to say. You touched on a few points that I really want to go to. One is that choice is essential. Judith Herman, she's the author of Trauma and Recovery. She says something to the effect of, I'm going to botch the quote, but it's something to the effect of, any intervention that takes away the power of choice from the survivor has no hope of helping them heal.
Yeah.
So if you are in a situation with a provider and you're in a situation, oh, and I want to talk to what I think her name was Nichelle just said, but if you're in a situation where you're not jiving with your therapist, it is not a fit for you, then you need to have the power of choice in saying, wow, this is not how I'm going to heal. Because first and foremost, in order to heal from this, you need to feel safe. And what you don't need is another environment where you're supposed to be safe, right? Like with your battle buddies, you're supposed to be safe, and then something bad happens to you, right? And the same is true with if you're not jiving with your therapist. If you're in an environment where you're supposed to feel safe and for whatever reason you aren't a fit, you need to have the power to be able to say, wow, this is just not a fit for me. And really, as a therapist, I'll tell you, like, I would hope if someone thought I wasn't a fit for them, they'd be like, yo, Jen, this isn't working. Like, I'm not going to take that personally. I just want the person to heal.
Right.
And I guess if someone's trying to control you to stay with them, then run. Because
You have the
yeah,
power to
yeah,
fire your provider.
please
And
do.
I think that's something because there's a question. There are some that I want to read, and out of respect for the nature of what we're speaking about, I will keep it anonymous for certain things that were stated. One of the questions was, did I miss it if I never reported it? We'll touch that here in a second. Someone said I finally started counseling for MST. It has helped me a lot. There's still some work to do. I was going to therapy for bipolar disorder, and we spoke about MST in therapy and group counseling as well. But one pointed question here is, why does the VA Medical Center use cognitive therapy or whatnot, where they make you repeat it over and over? It is why I opted for community care. And I think that statement is powerful because in the statement is the answer, right? The VA is one solution. It is
Yes,
not the only solution. I would
yes,
offer to everyone here that it took a long time for me to look into a vet center or the VA for anything. I literally found a therapist that I felt comfortable with, private practice, and made a point to do that. And the point is there are options. There's the vet centers that are free. The VA is a thing. You may have to request another provider. There are private practices. There's so many ways that are available. The archaic ways of what the VA may be doing in that location are not universal. However, the point here is that that's one modality. That said, when the patient is ready to go there, right? So we've kind of touched on understanding the why, the how, a little bit of, the different varieties of there. Jen, as you're building onto that, can you talk about the different types of therapy, right? So we don't have to unpack it all. I can fire my
No, no.
therapist. Makes sense. I'm
Yeah,
never going
yeah.
to fire you, by the way. Let's just put that out there. Um, but
Thank you.
if
I really enjoy our time together.
indeed. We literally are. We collaborate and talk here. She's not my therapist.
No, no, no.
Let's just put that out there right now. But this is the relationship we want to have, right? It's a conversation with someone to be able to laugh and cry and be honest and real about what's happening in your life. This is what it should somewhat feel like, and I hope that beyond what we're saying, you see how we're relating, because this is what therapy to me should be. And if it's not this, I walk out and leave and find somebody else, because I need to be able to look forward to coming to this, because you won't show up again if you don't feel comfortable. But Jen, to the point of the modalities, what are some ways once someone has got to the place of saying, okay, I want to start working on some of their deep rooted pains to move forward in life? Because the point was brought up of cognitive therapy.
Right, right. And so I just want to, I want to tread lightly here. I, as a trauma therapist who focuses on body-based interventions, because that's what the research in the last 10 to 20 years says is traumas in the body. And so that's what we need to use to heal. Some of those things like prolonged exposure therapy and cognitive restructuring, which is what that person was referring to. Those used to be the gold standard. Like, that's what we did. And it does work for some people. The dropout rate tends to be high because, as you can imagine, it's pretty traumatic repeating your story. It does help some people, though. However, we also know since then, I'm going to take a breath because that's nervous saying something different than what the VA does.
Again,
They do.
this is
Yes.
not saying
Uh-huh.
that the practice is
Being very
there,
careful.
but to understand what cognitive therapy is and what exactly is the purpose, right? Why am
Yeah.
I repeating this stuff? Do I
Yeah.
have to fall out of a
Well,
car over and over to just get stronger to fall out the car?
right.
What's happening here?
Right. So cognitive restructuring is getting you to say, and same with PE, they're very similar. They have some differences though.
And
But the
PE,
cognitive
for those that have never heard, that is
prolonged exposure.
okay.
Sorry. So there's basically this idea that if you go over things enough in the safety of a therapist's office and with your new perspective, you can retrain the brain on how it approaches what happened to you. And there is evidence that that works, and there are certain people that works for. It's a very treacherous thing to go through because, as you can imagine, you're retelling your story, you're re-experiencing over and over what happened to you. My preference is to look at more of the body-based therapies, and that's what actually Bessel van der Kolk talks about in that book that Amy held up for me, The Body Keeps the Score, is to use things like EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, which there is a reprocessing, but it's not a verbal telling of the story.
Right.
Sure, the details may or may not come up, but you never have to tell your therapist what's coming up for you. The only thing that your therapist needs to know is that while you're doing the what we call bilateral stimulation, so you might be watching something move across your eyes, or you might be getting hand taps or something like that. What the therapist needs to know is that whatever you're working on, whatever memory you're working on, is shifting. So it's a different way of working through it. Same with internal family systems, IFS. We work with different parts of you that hold the trauma. Again, the therapist doesn't need to know everything that happened to you. In fact, you don't even have to repeat it. It's about healing what happened. Trauma Center, trauma sensitive yoga is another. It's an adjunctive treatment for PTSD, especially complex PTSD. There's no telling of the story. It's all movement. Which, by the way, I want to say, I believe it's the VA in Georgia is doing a longitudinal study on using trauma center, trauma sensitive yoga for military sexual trauma. So stay tuned for that. We're really excited at the Center for Trauma Embodiment that that's coming out.
Literally, as soon as you said that, someone commented it, so I just popped it up real quick.
I love
Yoga
it,
works for
Kimberly. I'm
me.
so glad. Yoga can be great, but also, again, with yoga, you know, there's a long history in yoga of gurus and teachers being in charge and telling you what to do, and that works for some people. But with trauma, someone doing a physical adjustment on you, like taking over your body and moving you, or telling you exactly what your body needs to look like in yoga, tends to not be super great for trauma survivors. Sure, there's some who might enjoy it, but generally speaking, and that's why trauma center, trauma sensitive yoga, there's no touch, everything's a choice, things like that, right? There's two other body-based therapies that I don't know a lot about, that are also very effective. One is sensory motor processing, and the other one is somatic experiencing. So those are just some of the things that are more, I would say, more recent updated treatments. Brain spotting is another one that's very similar to EMDR. I know just a little bit about that one because I'm EMDR trained, so I haven't gone and I'm like, good enough, right?
But I think it's good. But it's for sure good. And again, we'll have the blog that accompanies this with information for those. So don't feel like if you didn't catch what we said, this will be replayed where you're watching it, and there will also be a blog that accompanies this with some information.
So I want to say one more thing, because this is something that you asked me before about. Amy was talking about how she's still healing, and I want to say that there's layers to healing. There's layers, right? And I can say this about my own healing work, which is different. But I have my own sexual trauma history. It's short, but it's there. And I will say there's layers of it, right? Like we might work through a piece of something in therapy, and we might be like, "Oh, I'm good. I feel like I can function again." And then all of a sudden, this other thing comes up in our life, and it triggers it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, so that's another layer for me right now. And so then you might land yourself back in therapy again and be like, okay, I'm going to work through this other layer that goes on for, that's coming up for me. And then you might be like, okay, cool. I'm good for a while, and then another layer, and you may or may not need to go to therapy again. I think what's really important is that you honor your own process. Mm-hmm. That you may have that initial contact with therapy, or maybe your initial contact is with an MFLAC. And you have a couple sessions and you're like, that's all I can handle right now. And then maybe in a year or so, you're like, I need to do something about this because this is starting to markedly impair my daily functioning, is what we call it in therapy, but basically making your life miserable, right? So you might...
But I think that's powerful, Jen. Again, because in my mind, I try to rationalize it for the individuals that may have never even known that these are things they even work on. And it almost sounds like to me like this is no different to a degree than working through something like physical therapy. If you lost the ability to do a thing, you're basically working to regain that strength or build muscles around it. Because, and one thing I think I really want to just make a point, and I want to get Amy your opinion and Jen yours, is for some, there's this concept that certain things may be regained. And you live in the past, right? Rear facing. And for some individuals, if you experience trauma, you may not retain or regain certain things, but that doesn't limit the experience of what may be created going forward, right? So again, me as a basic person that doesn't have a degree in any of the stuff, what I look at is, you may have some individuals that may have lost the sense of touch or certain things, and accidents may have happened, but they've built out strength around to regain the ability to walk. Those certain things may not have come back to how they used to be. There's strength around to be able to conduct and walk and do things. So to me, what it sounds like is it's a workout that it's an internal work, rather, both emotionally and psychologically, to be able to gain the strength to be able to move forward, find ways of working at things. As you challenge and grow, you can add pieces to that. So it's no different than if you've never been to the gym, right? Like, you're not going to be able to do everything in there, but just get on the treadmill, right? Go walk a little bit. Like, just show up. Let's have a conversation, and then maybe we'll get on the weights in 6 months, or maybe we'll do a little this, that, there. And again, I'm not diminishing at all the nature of this conversation, but to make it relatable, to really understand that this is something that can go in sections, right? There's no play here where I went to physical therapy or to the gym and I walked out with my results in a week, right? This is a process that I have understood now that I will be on, that will be beneficial to me moving forward. Is that something that makes sense? Am I off base there?
Absolutely. I think, one thing I would say too is, when you're dealing with some of these things, keep your circle small. There's so many people that have opinions on what you should do and what you shouldn't do and how you should handle it and how you shouldn't handle it. And sometimes that can be very overwhelming. And you have, a wife or a spouse that doesn't really understand, a brother or sister that says, why do you keep going to counseling? Or, your counselor is like your friend. It doesn't even help you. And I beg to differ. I know what I need. And so what helps me helps me. Keep your circle small, and you don't always have to share that with everybody. I'm a pretty open person, but I'm starting to learn more and more that, keeping that smaller circle is what's good for me.
Say,
And
say that
I
again. What you
keeping
said? What works for you works for you.
works for me. Yeah. And,
So wait a
and you
second,
have to,
Amy. Look again, crazy talk. Never talked to therapists here. I went through this thing and this worked for me, right? Shouldn't you do what I did? And again, it's rhetorical, but I think there's right. Part of the question I posted was, Amy, how did you go from being a victim to a survivor? That piece to me sounds a lot like part of the ingredients of your process.
absolutely.
When you got to a point of being able to even be able to articulate that what works for me works for me. This is my journey. This is my truth. This is my path, and I begin to put the pieces together to walk it.
Mhm.
Right. So, for the question, Amy, on your side, how would you answer? 30-second elevator speech. Again, real quickly, I'll give a 10-minute countdown here. If you want to be able to reach out to us, again, we're back tomorrow again. Join vaci.com below if you want to be able to reach out to Amy or Kenneth to work or speak to one of us. Our Facebook page, YouTube, and LinkedIn is also linked below. The blog will have Jen's information and her website as well that was shared. If you have any questions, please post them and we'll start moving into like a rapid fire type of discussion. But Amy, how did you go to answer the question from victim to survivor? 30 seconds.
Gosh, 30 seconds. I think, it's a personal choice, and it was something that I had to do for myself and for my kids. And I think that I found myself struggling to tell my story because I kept feeling like I was putting myself back in that victim role. And so through my therapist, the encouragement of, look, you're here, you're a survivor. You've made it through and you're talking about it. You told your story, you're getting help, you're doing what you need to, and you're constantly putting in the effort. You're constantly, at least you're trying, whether that means having a conversation like, you know what, my daughter wants to have a butterfly birthday party. And,
Oh no.
okay, you can do this. You can do it because you know what? You're past that.
Yep.
You're
Yep.
here now and you can do it. It doesn't have to be hundreds of butterflies. It can be a cake with a butterfly on it. And you meet in the middle and you do what you have to do to survive. And that's my thing is, I love what DP said when we were talking about this is becoming a victim to a survivor. And I think once you make that transition, you're good. You're ready to rock and roll. You're ready to work on your claim. You're ready to move forward, whatever that looks like, whether that's talking to your coach, talking to your therapist, talking to somebody that you trust, is just taking yourself. You're no longer in that
Mm.
position. You're not in that vehicle that you can't get out of anymore. You're not that victim anymore. You've survived it. And now you're on the road to recovery. Now you're the survivor. And it's a lot of self-talk, self-motivation, looking at my kids and thinking, you know what? I got to be better. I got to do better.
Mm.
I got to make sure that I don't transfer my anxiety, my fears, my issues to them.
Would it be
And
safe to say that that transition from being a victim to a survivor is not a on-off switch, but rather survivor means the journey?
absolutely,
Because there
absolutely,
are
yeah,
days when you're not going to be feeling like a survivor. There are days when you don't feel good, but when
absolutely.
you understand that that's a process, that
Mhm.
switch of how did you go there, it is a journey. It is like it's
Right,
living. You live as a survivor. I am a survivor. I have overcome. Though you fall, we move forward. Getting
right.
being knocked down doesn't take you back in reverse. It's just what happened today, right?
Yeah, sometimes you're at a standstill. Sometimes you're like, oh, I'm struggling. So one last thing I will add is my counselor, she's amazing. I do talk to her every week. I mean, I know there's controversy, but you know what? That's what's best for me. and that's what helps me be who I am and be a survivor. She reminds me of things that I need to be reminded of, and she kind of regrounds me. And I will say, because I do have a struggle with the butterflies, she does. And Jen, you can probably relate to this. And I have done EMDR and I loved it. I just want to put that out there. She does, for one Christmas, she got me and you have to tread very lightly when people have triggers as far as how to introduce things. But she knew that my goal was to work on the butterflies because I have two girls that want everything butterflies. And so she tried to transition to, different analogies of, it becomes it's from a cocoon, it becomes something, beautiful, and then it's free. And then it's free, right? You're free to it. And that it can be a beautiful thing. And to try to look at it like, hey, I was in this dark place, but I've slowly grown into something more beautiful, and I'm free. I'm a survivor. I'm free. And so for Christmas, she gave me a beautiful golden butterfly that I hang at the top of my tree. There's a few people that know the significance of it, and they know that only I hang it. And it's a reminder for me. It's a reminder that, you know what, I was there, but I am here, and it's a constant path. And it's a reminder that I'm okay. You know what? I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to continue on this journey. And that butterfly, that red, that doesn't define me. Those northern lights, they don't define me. They don't define who I am. It defined a period of my life that wasn't good, but I've since overcome that, and it's still a work in progress. And for me, and what somebody else's therapy is, I have one guy who he talks to his psychologist 3 times or every 3 months, and that's enough for him. He says what he has to say. He gets his medication refill, and that's all he
It's
needs,
it's
and
it's
he's
a
good.
it's a
And
personal
so,
journey that's tailored to every individuals, and that's part of that recipe that it's constantly evolving and being agile. Um,
yep.
Rapid fire. Brenda question been denied twice. Instant reported. No police report. Buddy Layers as well decides to let it go. What else can you do? We're gonna touch on that tomorrow as far as how to be able to articulate that. I had a male survivor who had been denied 3 times for PTSD in the mid '80s. No reports or anything. And
Mm.
via markers and being able to paint a picture of what happened in that individual's life over time, we were able to get that turned around and win that piece. So, Brenda, the fight ain't over until
No.
you give up, right? That's the thing. We keep pushing, and I think that's where support comes into play. Amy had some reports on her side. Kenneth did not have on his end. Both were able to be successful. It's just kind of hunkering down for that push. Jen would appreciate this one. Yoga works for me. I can't keep telling the stories over and over.
Uh,
Um, let's see this.
nice. I like it.
And I
Ha,
do want to
have you ever
again for tomorrow.
experienced? I'm sorry. Yeah, you could. You could, I'll let Jen read this one.
I do want to put a plug in for tomorrow. Nayali is going to be on, and I think the world of Nayali. She's a great asset to our team. She's a former VSO, and she will give you so much information about how to articulate your stories in markers, 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 markers. And she's been very successful in helping people identify their markers to get them rated when they didn't report. So if
Amy, don't know. You're giving too much. They gotta come back tomorrow. You're giving too much. If not, they're not gonna come. You're giving them all secrets. But tune in tomorrow. We have a great cast,
yes,
and we're gonna talk about that. Stellate ganglion blocks. Jen, have you heard of this?
I have not. I mean, the ganglia, they're in the brain, but I can't say that I do. I'm tempted to look it up on my phone, which I won't make you watch me do.
Yeah, but we
But
but
I
we
am
can
going to
we,
look it
we can
up.
reach out and we can get that information to you.
Stellate,
Um,
stellate ganglion blocks.
they asked your location. Lisa did answer that as far as where you're practicing, so the information to your practice is also been shared in the comments.
Yeah, I
Um,
was in Colorado Springs. I've since moved, but I could probably hook you up with someone there
okay.
because I know a lot of people in the EMDR community there. So shoot me an email if
Cool.
you're in Colorado
And,
Springs
and
and
we'll,
you.
we'll put that again here, so you will have the contact information for her.
Perfect.
Layers never thought about it like that.
Yeah, super
Let's
huge.
see.
Yep.
Well, the
All of
question
like
was, will
layers.
this be created later? Yes, it will. Um, some information about the practice was here, shared as well for those that are looking into it.
Virtual medicine, yes.
Yep.
I would say
Um,
if you're going to start with EMDR, I would, if there is an in-person provider available, I would recommend that to be better. But just something to point out real quick.
Absolutely,
this is
really.
powerful here. The goal is for someone to find all the resources that work for them.
Yes.
Mhm. Yep.
Yep. That's great, Noelle.
Yep, we'll be able to share this as well. So if you reach out to us and comment, Jen, we'll get that information to you. Um, let's see. John says, Amy's amazing. She fought and built her strength over time. Truly a survivor. Thank you,
Mm.
John.
So he's the one who really saved me. He's the one that caught me in my office with my door closed. Didn't know me. Didn't think I liked him. He scared me a little bit because he had long hair. I was new, and he found me on the floor. I didn't answer my door when he knocked, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And from that day forward, he was every day. He checked on me, and he was a lifesaver. And so sometimes you just have to hang on to people like that.
Mm.
He's a friend, but he was my therapist for years and years and years.
The Hope
So
Foundation, for those that are seeing here, Inc. Florida. We did a
Right.
talk with them not too long ago. I spoke in one of their meetings virtually a few weeks ago. Click on their profile and check them out. They're doing some good work down in Florida. Therapies for veterans, non-veterans,
Cool.
different modalities. So it's a great couple doing great things. They're both therapists. So good information. Definitely check them out if you see them here noted below. Um, does anyone know? I have a friend. Yes. So there. Uh, this may be a topic for discussion. Let's reconnect. Definitely, brother. We'll definitely reconnect. So we'll coordinate for that one. A lot of Danielle said thank you.
Mm,
Nancy shared you're so
thank
well
you.
spoken, Amy. Thank you so much for the information. You killed this. Thank you for sharing your story. Um, thank you for going live with this subject. Um,
Yeah.
the true healing means that you have to take on difficult work and knowing it's very unlikely going to be a lifelong struggle. The therapy helped me
Mm,
to recognize that things are going south and to calm myself down to present versus the past.
yeah.
Thank you, Sherry, for sharing that. I think that's again powerful. Lisa has shared. Tomorrow we're back for part two, talking about the claim process and building off of this point here. Mark appreciated the information, found it informative. For those, again, Pathways to Wellness, LLC.com is where you can find Jen
Mm,
and the information that she has available there. Um, let's see. A lot of appreciations for different things. The Hope Foundation, thank you for sharing that as well here. The Hope Foundation Healing,
oh,
the Hope Foundation and Healing, the Hope and Healing Foundation .com. If I could claim dyslexia, that's probably something I could look into. um, Aside of that, in closing, I really just want to share and say that one, Amy, right? We've talked about this before. One, I commend you, and I commend Kenneth for not only being a coach and being a veteran coach and helping veterans say, hey, go that way. I went that way, and that might be an option, or that way, but move. And not only doing that, but sharing your story, which I know to a degree is healing, but it's also being vulnerable and owning that piece. So, as a veteran, as a coworker, as someone here basically supporting and helping veterans at VA Claims Insider and VACI Champions, I want to just honor you and thank you for sharing your journey. I know that it's not an easy topic, but this is what we do, right? We put faces to stigmas and break them, right? Because being a survivor happened this morning for you, and tomorrow morning the continuation continues of being a survivor. So thank you, Amy, for being strong, for being a
mm,
survivor, for showing others that you can go from point A to point B to point C to point D, and it continues on as long as there's air in your lungs. So thank you for sharing your story. I know it's powerful and impactful for many. Jen, thank you so much for again
oh,
collaborating
of
with us
course.
and sharing your knowledge and being the therapist we all wish we had.
Well,
So if you tune in, you'll get some of that here. As we
yes.
close, Amy, no, I'm going to go to Jen. You're going to get 10 seconds and then we'll go. Amy gets 10 seconds. But Jen, what is Jen's tip as we close out for those out there who are like, okay, it kind of makes sense, but Jen, you're cool and stuff, but I had a bad experience. Whatever that may be, what's Jen's tip to those that may be watching or hearing wherever they are now?
So I don't know that I've ever been a 10-second speaker in my whole
No,
life.
that was for Amy, not for you.
But you know what I'll say is I admire the courage that it took for you to serve your country, serve our country, and I think this is just as courageous to take the step to say, you know what, I'm tired of being a victim. I don't want to let this define me anymore. Mm-hmm. I want to live my life, and that takes a lot of courage. And I trust that somewhere you have it in you. And my hope is that you can find whatever supports you need to, so that you can find that courage within you to take that step to get help, and whatever that looks like for you, whether it's reaching out to VA Claims Insider coaches, or finding an MFLAC, or Military One Source, or even just naming what happened to you to another human being who is safe enough to tell the story to. Mm-hmm. So I wish you all the hope in the world that you can connect with your inner courage that I know you have.
And we will share these also for you. They'll have good information and resources available. So this is also being shared for those that are following along. Amy, on your side, what's Coach Amy's tip?
I've never been 10 seconds either, DP. I feel like he always cuts me off real quick. But first of all, I have to say thank you to DP, because he has really brought a new side of me out, and given me that courage and that strength, and made me believe in myself that I could tell my story. Because before I worked with DP, or worked for DP, I absolutely would never have done something like this. So I am so thankful that he's given me this opportunity. And with him giving me the opportunity, the encouragement, and saying you can do this, it's allowed me to help so many people. And I love that. And it's made it easier, and it definitely has made me a better person. It's made me a stronger person. It's made me own myself, own my story, and be confident. So I thank you, DP, for allowing me to be a part of this movement with you, because it's amazing. I want to help, if I can, please reach out to me. And I believe there's power in telling your story and telling your truth and becoming vulnerable, and don't give up, just keep fighting. You've come this far. Don't turn back. And we've seen so many success stories. Like DP said, it might not happen the first time, but keep fighting the good fight, and we'll get you there. We'll do everything we can to help you and coach you and assist you. And I'm just so thankful that you guys joined, and thank you for the support for, especially all my friends, families, and my clients, and DP and Jen. It's always a pleasure, of course.
Oh, always good to see you both.
Absolutely. So thank you.
All I'll close in saying is, we can't fix what happened yesterday.
Absolutely.
But we can build to tomorrow. And if that is the one thing you can walk away with, that's the reality of what we're trying to do, is equip and have resources to face today and get tomorrow up and face it again. So we hope to see you again for our next one. I'm just a guy clicking the mouse here, trying to make a camera work.
You do more than that, DP.
Whatever. I do want to say one more thing, DP, since you brought it up. I do think that it's important what DP said. You can't fix it. And so, it's not something that's going to be fixed. It's not something that's going to go away. And it's not something you're going to get an apology for. It's not something that you're going to find that closure because whoever did whatever they did this thing is going to come and be like, I'm so sorry that I ruined your life. That's not going to happen. So come knowing that, with the strength within you is going to make you from a victim to a survivor. It's not going to take away what happened, but you're going to get the tools and the experience, and you're going to be a survivor of your own story. And so keep that in mind and keep fighting the good fight.
With that said, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you guys for joining us and
Bye.
spending the afternoon with us.